And thanks again for SCN for having me. I do appreciate this opportunity. There are many phenomenal professionals on this line right now, and I do recognize your time and attention. And I want to try to hopefully educate you, maybe enlighten you on maybe a couple things you didn't know about the flood control district, and kind of plant some seeds for some future collaboration. So I will start off. Let's see if I can move this over. All right. So I'll just start off saying that just to be as blunt as possible, as Anne kind of already alluded, my goal with all of this is to really reach out to as many of you on the screen as possible so we can start collaborating on some more integrated strategies and solutions to address the ever increasing challenges that the Arizona landscape has, whether it's with water or energy or heat or air quality or many other challenges. And with the growing climate and other changes, it's been recognized that in order for really effective infrastructure to be implemented, it takes collaboration and a shared resources. And I think a key leverage point is to understand where the objectives are of our various organizations and departments and try to meld those together, break down some silos, and move forward with kind of getting some more innovative solutions. So again, hopefully that this presentation provides some fruitful information for you all. I'm providing my contact information early on in case you have to jump off early. Please write it down. Please reach out. Some of you have already reached out to me just the past couple of days. So I will be getting back with you and we'll begin. So I'm going to move very quickly for the first half of this presentation. As Anne already alluded, many of us are already pretty aware of the various conditions in the Southwest and the challenges that Arizona has. So the first half, I'm going to move very quickly. And then the last half is the tail end. We're going to dive more into the nuances of the flood control district in Maricopa County, some of the efforts of what has been done, and talk specifically more about a structure evaluation that we did and what that means for steps forward. So as I said, I'm going to be blunt and quick. So here's the water cycle, and it's the hydrologic cycle. And whether you like it or not, all water is connected, period. Arizona has a diverse water supply, and courtesy of ADWR, they were able to provide some informative graphics on their website that are readily available. And as you can see, the Colorado River, in-state rivers, a little bit of reclaimed water and groundwater are the primary sources. The sorry, I guess the slideshow's automatically going, so I apologize if it's kind of going back and forth. I'll try to mitigate that. In internal rivers in Arizona, the Salt River Project has a delivery system that utilizes two major watersheds. The SRP also works very closely with multiple agencies to manage Arizona's forest for a more sustained and reliable water supply. The Central Arizona Project, however, takes in the Colorado River allocations of Arizona and actually delivers that water to Metro Phoenix. And the Central Arizona Project provides about 80% of Arizona's population with some type of water. But it's important to note that the CAP is a vast, complex system. And I think it's valid to state that your water bill from the CAP is also primarily an electric bill when it comes to covering the costs associated with transporting your water to you. Arizona's Colorado River allocation is roughly 2.8 million acre feet. However, as Anne also mentioned, we're aware that there are shortages present, and water shortages mean less available water for CAP users, including municipalities. A tier 2A shortage is here, and it's important to note that in August of 2022, this image on the screen is outdated, and we did have a nice kind of more wet winter and a more wet summer last year, which helped alleviate some of the short-term challenges. However, the long-term projections are still not favorable, as we're again probably all aware and privy to. Arizona has been in a drought for over 23 years. The Bureau of Reclamation and using their tools and studies and projections are claiming that 2 to 4 million acre feet must be saved in the system to prevent unstable levels. And as I just mentioned, 2 to 4 million acre feet, that's more than the entirety of Arizona's allocated Colorado River supply. Municipalities also play a role. So a lot of folks might look at the big headlines, look at big water, ADWR, but it's also important to note that municipalities work out different agreements with either private or local or state or regional water providers. They have their own types of water rights and agreements in order to provide clean and reliable water to their citizens. There's 26 municipalities here listed, and as these projected shortages continue, persist, the heat keeps just hitting the ground and rapidly increasing evapotranspiration and transpiration in the landscape. We're gonna need more ongoing collaboration with the various agencies. And parentheses there, that also includes the flood control district. So it is also important to note, and like I said, many of the champions of the water world of the West, many of you are on here, and your ongoing work and effort is not forgotten. So I was a little doom and gloom, but there are also many different approaches that are happening on the regular with all these different inputs. For the most part in the Southwest, Arizona has had a pretty diverse approach. You could even say, dare I say, a progressive approach at managing its water, dating back to 1980 with the Groundwater Management Act, and moving since then. This is a graphic provided by ADWR, and it highlights some key, a really exciting takeaway, which is the fact that we've relatively, since around 1985, the valley, Arizona itself, has used around the same amount of water, and it was 1.7 million. Now we're over 7 million people, and we're using about the same amount of water. And how do we get there? Well, a good takeaway here is that there's been an incredible advancements in water efficiencies and converting high water use industry to other uses. There's also been advancements in wastewater reuse. There is a growing effort to not just take effluent and treat it and put it in the ground and have it part of your portfolio as a municipality, but also potable reuse or toilet to tap. And as efficiencies increase in water use, there is also some argument to be made for the wastewater availability in the future. There are also inputs for some small amounts of desalinization. Desal has come a long way in its technologies, but there's an asterisk, a caveat with that. It is likely an extremely expensive endeavor, and is hard to supplement all of our water with desal. So that's something to keep in mind. And then in times of excessive drought, what normally happens is more and more folks pump more non-renewable groundwater out of the system. Some of the municipalities are tapping their reserves of their water portfolio. They've been storing groundwater for a decade plus, and some municipalities are getting prepared to tap that water portfolio. But the bolded section here is the stormwater capture and reuse. And it's kind of been the elephant in the room for quite some time. There have been some awesome residents in various communities that have found progress in making it more readily available and looking into the implementation and the best management practices for stormwater capture and reuse. And I want to dive a little bit more into that. So in 2022, the EPA provided a national study that looked into the case for stormwater capture and use. And it looked into what are the driving factors and benefits associated with stormwater capture and use. And I just want to highlight the graph here from this study, which pinpoints the fact that they estimated that approximately 3/4 of the total public supply can be substituted with urban stormwater capture. That's not not industrial use, that's not agricultural use, it's more of municipality use. But it's important to note that it is a key factor here. And just like all those other options I just mentioned, it is a consideration for moving forward. And as you can see, flood control is one of the main driving groups to support this stormwater capture and use. I'm not saying anything new. There are many other agencies that are already utilizing strategies for stormwater mitigation and capture. Pima County has been a champion for 2 decades plus. Riverside County, LA County, Contra Costa, and others. You might even see your county on here. There are also other examples from a national scale, either federal, regional, state. There are numerous studies and case studies that are out there. I can't possibly list all of them. There is an ever expanding resource repository for all of these amazing projects that are happening. And it's really exciting. So what is the Flood Control District of Maricopa County doing? So I'm going to slow down a little bit, dive a little bit deeper into this. And before I can do that, I have to kind of introduce you a little bit to what the Flood Control District of Maricopa County, who we are, what we do. Again, Ann provided a good kind of synopsis of that. She was able to read our mission, and I just want to highlight this section of the mission, which says that stormwater is recognized as a resource for, oops, I'm sorry, I should know it by heart by now, for the long-term benefit of community and the environment. And it's important to note that we are a district, we're a special taxing district, and we have certain obligations. And as long as we're providing the functions associated of flood control, we can move, we can implement our mission and efforts moving forward. And we recognize that we also require with our planning studies, ongoing collaborations with various municipalities. And with us doing the work of flood control, there is also the ongoing maintenance of our structures and properties. And in 2016, there was an internal effort done to start getting some of that information and really assessing, okay, what structures do we have? What are the types of structures that we have? What is the land associated with that? And starting to put some of these pieces together in association with more of the integrated water conservation strategies. So the district has over 100 plus structures. We own and maintain over 30,000 acres. We have a plethora of different types of flood control structures, including non-structural solutions and mitigation areas. And we also have a website available to the public for anyone to go on, look at the GIS data layers and find what structures we have and own and operate within your municipality. I also want to highlight that from past efforts of district staff, there have been established resolutions to allow for integrated strategies to occur on district-owned lands. There was a resolution in 2018 that effectively allows groundwater recharge, aquifer replenishment, underground water storage, water conservation, and the like on flood control property. We also acknowledge that there are secondary uses for the district lands that the district owns. For example, alternative energy. And there are many examples already in place where district property has been used from a multi-use standpoint, where it's been recreational parks and other of the like have been present behind district structures. I also just want to highlight that we are in alignment. We have we've assessed Maricopa County's visioning document, comp plan of 2030. Here are a list of some of the goals that align with this endeavor. There are also national alignment where there are documents, studies. FEMA 480 acknowledges that the value of natural and beneficial floodplain functions that they provide, having a more natural flood and erosion control, more biological resources, societal resources. There's also documents from the Bureau of Reclamation that also align with these efforts. And this isn't, again, brand new for the district. The district has been involved in different approaches towards integrated strategies in the past, dating all the way back to 1988. There's actually I don't know if the city of Peoria or Surprise is on, but from 1996, there was a pilot study where we implemented a recharge pilot with Peoria and Surprise. And there were many lessons learned and advancements from that. However, what you'll look at in Surprise and Peoria's water portfolio now is they actually utilize recharge as part of their main water portfolio. There are other studies here that, again, many of the past individuals at the district were champions of. I'm just fortunate enough to kind of move on and communicate some of the lessons learned. And today we're going to dive into the structure evaluation. So in 2022, the district partnered with Biohabitats on completing and implementing a overarching evaluation of flood control structures and properties for 10 different integrated water resource management strategies. There was a great deal of effort involved in it. It was kind of uncharted territory. There had been an internal investigation in the past, very briefly, as shown here with the groundwater recharge feasibility investigation, but there were other alternatives that have now become more, there have been more case studies where these strategies have already been implemented, and we could reflect on them and see their potential on our structures and properties. So I have a little wordy of a slide after this, and from here on out, I do have also an apology. My slides commit a PowerPoint sin where they have way too many words on them. So I know that these slides will become available after the fact, and I'm going to move through them as quickly as I can. Don't worry if you haven't read through all of it, they'll be available and you can look through it, and we can have more discussions about these various strategies at a later date or in the questions. So I will say that there are some disclaimers and some of the findings from this evaluation. I just want to reiterate that this study does not represent and should not be construed to represent the district's final determinations. All findings and results will require further investigation and analysis beyond the report. It was a high-level theoretical evaluation that primarily looked at the physical evaluation of district structures and properties. All of the 10 strategies that were evaluated have been shown to provide a flood mitigation component. So thus we are within our lane and doing what we're trying to do to protect people from flooding and using stormwater as a resource. Okay, again, district sites are often located in or around adjacent drainage areas, which makes it logically more possible for these various opportunities of these strategies, incorporating more infiltration. And I will say that one of the key findings from this study is that it showed that there are considerable opportunities for application of these strategies on all structures that were evaluated. And I will also say that, again, it was physical evaluation. The economic, political, legal were omitted from the study. Any further project partner, we would likely have to, they would have to determine those factors for themselves. So here's the list of some of the main strategies that I'm going to be talking about and showing you, and some case studies and examples. The water resource strategies, again, many of you on this call have likely already are aware of these strategies, or even have been champions of implementing these strategies. They are abundant. They really, really are all across the Southwest. They aren't some extraneous, weird quasi thing. And for example, Sedona, I know, is on the line. You have a wonderful wetland preserve that utilizes effluent water to meet its needs and infiltrate water. The town of Gilbert has the riparian water preserve at Water Ranch. And they have spreading basins associated there. That riparian preserve, owned and operated by the town of Gilbert, has a 110 acre-foot recharge facility with 7 basins that receives wastewater effluent and is incorporated within the town of Gilbert's water portfolio. Spreading a recharge basins can provide a multitude of benefits, can provide more opportunities for parks, wildlife habitat. They help with infiltration. They can also help with flood management. And the district uses basins quite regularly as a big mitt at the bottom of a downstream development. Another one is injection wells. So there is potential to take water and force it in the ground. And the key component here is, let's say if you don't have the land space associated with a spreading basin, you can have a smaller footprint with an injection well. And again, this is primarily right now used with treated effluent water, but there is potential to also use injection wells to slow any type of infiltration, but injection wells can be more targeted to help slow potentially subsidence in an area. Subsidence is an extremely difficult, complex thing that you can't quite stop, but if subsidence is being caused from the extraction of groundwater for our potable use, there is some input that you can likely slow some of that subsidence if you're injecting other water in the same area. Here's a lofty, many different terms, but it's all something we're all familiar with. Flood MAR, managed aquifer recharge, or agriculture irrigation or on-farm recharge. Since the agrarian time, 10,000 years ago plus, since agriculture has been present, there's been the utilization of flood water for that agriculture. And the times are no different. The only real challenge now is that we've kind of channelized some of our waterways, and it makes it harder for us to regularly predict or anticipate the immediate flooding on agriculture. Also, there are regulations ensue of the quality of that stormwater and how it's used for production of food. So likely what is normally used now, there is a fabulous FloodMAR program in Fresno, in California, where they take, let's say, fallowed land of agriculture, and they direct and allow the land to utilize the floodwaters as seen as on-farm recharge for flooding the field and allowing more natural infiltration over that soil. And then it helps with crop rotation and the like. Ecological enhancement. So this is something that the district itself, the flood control district, owns many different parcels in the direct floodway in many of the rivers of Arizona, particularly in the Gila River. And with it, the district has 2 pilot sites where there is an ongoing maintenance and monitoring to assess how to approach potentially removing tamarisk, an invasive species that changes the soil constructs and saps a whole bunch of water out of the land and creates a monoculture, diminishing the ecological vitality of that space. That, again, if you have a healthier, more naturalized riparian floodway or floodplain, it has been shown that there are more additional natural and beneficial functions by slowing floodwater, reducing damage and erosion, improving water quality and quantity, and promoting habitat. So we have 2 sites. It's just off of Highway 85, and there are riparian obligates planted at one of the sites. And then there are more drought tolerant species at another location. And there is, again, ongoing maintenance. We're in the process of advancing drone monitoring and understanding more of the survivability of the vegetation out there. Another thing that was assessed in the structure evaluation, and it isn't talked about, I think, quite as much, but it's important to recognize that there is a strong interdependence between energy and water. Water is used for energy production, and energy is used to treat and move and distribute water. And finding better ways of generating energy with no extraneous water demand or use will be beneficial for the Southwest. And the district in the past did an alternative energy analysis on a handful of its structures. There are lands that we have to own in perpetuity in result of the fact that it is a flood hazard location. And it's the flood pools directly behind our structures and dams. There are also some available on the fringes, some potential for more alternative energy solutions. There's an example here with SRP solar farm. There's even the potential of a pumped storage hydropower. Now, this is more pie in the sky from the standpoint of maybe Arizona's standpoint, because in order to have pumped storage hydropower, you also need a lot of water. However, there is the potential to put a cover over it. So there's minimal water loss, and ultimately you use the surplus of renewable energy to pump water uphill, and then now you have a battery, essentially a gravity-fed battery at any time that you need. And we did look into, there were a handful of flood structures where there was potential. However, the likelihood of that would need extensive project partner collaboration. Another alternative is the additional alternative outfalls. So this one's a little heady, especially for those not directly in the flood control world. But it's important to note that there are locations throughout the valley where some flood water does overtop and pour into some of the adjacent canals where potable water is located. And I'm not saying the district itself does not pursue water rights of any sort. We are trying to protect people from flooding. And in this specific instance, this is the Guadalupe FRS structure, and the development of the surrounding area made it pretty much impossible to establish another path for floodwater to go without utilizing the existing established infrastructure. So what typically happens in this kind of little schematic that I kind of drew up here, not schematic, but little kind of visual drawing, is that if on the off chance that there is an exorbitant amount of flood flows, 100-year flood event or whatnot, and it reaches the outflow point of the Guadalupe FRS, there is an intake, an outtake valve or outtake location where ultimately that water will flow into and pour into an adjacent highline canal. The highline canal is designed with 3 different sub-basins where some of that excess runoff can actually be directed into and protect the integrity of the canal in the event of a flood event. But the point is that it's utilizing existing infrastructure to move that water through, and then ultimately the Highline Canal directs that water and pours it ultimately into a stream down, into a riverbed bottom downstream. But this is something to keep in mind as, again, more and more as infrastructure costs balloon, we'll likely have to find potential ways of utilizing existing infrastructure. And who knows, maybe even if it gets too scarce water supply, find a potential way to direct that occasional stormwater to these canals and have it available for potable use. But again, that's a hypothetical. We're not actively looking into that. We're mainly looking at it from a flood control standpoint. But if a municipality is interested, they should, I think, be aware that this is an option. And then also green stormwater infrastructure or green infrastructure or low impact development. There's all these different terms for it. And they all have their minor subtleties depending on the application and where you're at and implementing it. But there is an overarching agreement across the board that GSI, green stormwater infrastructure, has a space in flood control, has a space in supporting our communities and supporting urban pluvial flooding. It has a space with helping mitigate nuisance floods. And there's a lot of different approaches to go at it, treatment trains and the like. And to couple it with green stormwater infrastructure, you also have to think about the vegetation that's used for for those projects. And I want to highlight, some of you might already be aware that the district has its own native tree nursery, specifically the native tall pot nursery. So why does the flood control have a nursery of its own? Well, because as mentioned earlier on, the district owns hundreds of structures, tens of thousands of acres. We work with large projects where we are effectively removing the existing desert landscape. And there is an overarching agreement that vegetation helps with erosion control, sediment deposition, helps with infiltration. And if we can speed up the succession process after an area has been disturbed, there are many benefits associated with that. And this specific method allows us to plant hundreds of trees on a site with no supplemental irrigation. The tall pot method supports the native taproot system that native drought tolerant trees kind of have. And it supports that long taproot so that when you plant it in the ground, it already has that long established root system. So it allows it to be more viable and it has a higher survivability rate. And we have about 8 different species. Our nursery coordinator is experimenting with mild short pots at the moment, and also trying to expand the plant palette, looking towards potentially maybe desert shrubs of some sort. But it's all in an effort to revegetate the lands that are disturbed. So those are the various strategies overall. And I do want to what did that mean to the structure evaluation? So we ultimately had to get a group of us together, have a big think tank, look over what are some examples of the past, look over what these strategies, where they're implemented, and try to come up with some type of evaluation criteria specifically for how to rank them as a high, medium, or low. And these are some of the data layers and the evaluation parameters associated with those data layers as we plugged in all of our GSI, all of our structures, looked them into a GSI map, and ultimately came up with a visual map. And I want to spend a majority of the remainder of the time that I have talking about these maps and allowing us as a group to just kind of like look at it and see if you can start coming up with some of your own ideas. And at first it can be a little overwhelming to look at them. So this is one structure. It's our Adobe Dam structure. And it shows you the various data layers, the soil types, and what have you. And if you take a keen look, you'll notice that behind our own dam is that we have ball fields. We have a golf course. There's actually a little air park down here. And all of these things are part of this structure. And it still functions as a flood control structure. So this is a very generic one. But I'm going to move on. So we evaluated the structure, and then on the back side of it, we kind of showed the overarching results of the evaluation. And looking at the 10 different strategies, there are, from a potential standpoint, only only 2 of the strategies had a high potential, ranked as H, and it's wind and solar. And then the other one is GSI. But it also is keen to note that it does have information on potential future project partners, kind of the history, kind of what the ongoing maintenance for the district is on those structures. And it just gives you this wonderful snapshot of, okay, we're talking to City X on an area drainage master study. What are the structures the district already has? What are the already established kind of known potential strategies when we get to the alternative analysis phase in the ADMS/P efforts? And then we can start having those conversations. And it turns out that through this high level evaluation that there's potential for solar and wind and GSI. Another structure I want to highlight, and this is key, this is one that has a lot more going on. And the first one was more generic. This one kind of shows more of the breadth of the various GSI layers that were included in this evaluation. So this is at the Agua Fria River Channel, and you'll notice there's more colors, there's more shades, there's quite a bit going on. It might be hard to look at, but just try to be patient with yourself, look at it a little bit, try not to strain your eyes, and try to make a little bit of sense of it. Start looking at some of the items on the right. So it identifies land subsidence. It identifies wildlife corridors. It identifies the soil types, the FEMA flood zones, the potential underground water sites, the surrounding wastewater treatment locations. And you can start putting some of these things together. Oh, there's a potential underground water site that's in relative adjacency to a wastewater treatment plant, but there's also a Superfund site. So there is some concern about the water that's being put into the ground. And then you can also see kind of the subsidence that's going on here. So the result of the evaluation here is that it actually shows that there is a high potential for just about all of the strategies that were evaluated on this site. We didn't evaluate every single structure for every single strategy. It was based on what was the criteria associated. So wind and solar wasn't heavily available. The criteria for a pump storage hydropower location wasn't readily available. You really need a large mountain nearby, and that wasn't readily available. So some of these strategies were immediately not applicable, but the ones that were, this one, because of all that, all these different data layers all happening and intermingling in this one location, through use of this evaluation, we can see, oh, there actually is high potential for an injection well or flood mar or stream enhancement or others. So again, it kind of shows, again, high level potential future project partners, kind of what's been going on there, the ongoing maintenance. And it doesn't take long after just looking about 2 or 3 of these, of the results of the structure evaluation, that if you're a city planner, if you are someone or a water conservation person or a parks and rec person or someone trying to look at, okay, we have this development happening here and there is adjacency to a wastewater treatment plant, and we have to meet our flood mitigation criteria for this development with a potential basin, there you can start overlapping all these things. And what I'm, again, really trying to get after, with given the privilege to speak with you all today, is start having these conversations. We have some tools at the district, such as the structure evaluation and others, to be more prepared to have some of these talks. We're not saying we're implementing these things. We're not saying we're going out and in search of buying any type of new lands. We're not trying to buy more things for us to maintain at the end of the day. However, we are trying to find a way to utilize the resources that we already have and optimize them for future use, and trying to put these various kind of blend some of these things together. I have this slide up just to highlight the significance of GSI. So one of the key findings from the structure evaluation was that just about every single structure that was evaluated came back as being high potential for GSI. It's a low-hanging fruit with a great deal of benefit on a multitude of different fronts that can benefit across departments. I was fortunate to get one of these images from Jacob Prieto from the county of Pima County. He provided this graph to me from an older presentation that he gave, and it just highlights in U of A's rainfall data in Tucson. So it's slightly different than in the Phoenix metropolitan area. However, the key takeaway is that the first inch of 95% of storms can be alleviated primarily with GSI. Will it solve the 100-year, 500-year flood event? No, it won't. But will it alleviate nuisance flooding in urban, known flooding areas with pluvial flooding in urbanized areas? Yes, it can. Will it also provide all these other benefits? It will, working with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Nature Conservancy, there was a study that was an LID study that looked at what is the potential of maybe of a treatment train of LID features. And one of the high level theoretical modeling of it was that there is some lowering of peak flood volumes with a certain amount of GSI that's implemented. It improves air quality. It diminishes the urban heat island effect. It also aligns, GSI is becoming more and more incorporated with city and town sustainability initiatives. The list goes on and on. So again, why am I here? Well, some of you might know, some of you might not, that the district does have a capital improvement program. There's also known as kind of a small projects program, an SPAP program, where essentially you have to submit a project for the district, a cost share, to get funding to implement these flood control strategies, if you will. So how do we implement these strategies? And I'm getting at it with the CIP. But there are also other opportunities on the horizon. And again, as we hopefully interact more and communicate more, we can talk about what some of those future opportunities might be. The CIP is primarily for large projects, but there are initiatives to allow for a more smaller projects and maybe even GSI. So we're moving forward on some of those aspects. And again, if we can talk more, we can address, kind of get some ideas of what you're looking for from your municipality and kind of what your goals are and how it aligns with how can we alleviate flood control and flooding issues in your areas. So there's a lot to take in from here. I tried my best to assimilate as best I could the role of flood control, where we're at, kind of what strategies are available, what the district's been doing. I apologize, I wasn't able to highlight even more of the great work that's being done here in Arizona. It's not all doom and gloom. There is a great deal of different approaches. And this kind of phrase here seems to be reverberating amongst the water world, but it's not a this or that, but a this and that approach. So with that, please reach out, and it's time to collaborate. So here's my contact information, and I'm definitely open for questions and any comments you might have.